Princess Lyra of the Orinthian Empire stood in the Grand Council chamber, her shimmering violet eyes reflecting the cold white lights above. Her crystalline skin glowed faintly, as if the universe itself whispered around her, but inside she felt nothing but tension. The counselors whispered behind their fans, their voices sharp and full of doubt. She had heard it all before, rumors of her failure, her inability to carry life. In a species where fertility was celebrated as strength, her condition made her a topic of scorn. "They say she cannot give life," one counselor muttered to another, barely hiding a smirk. "How can she serve the Empire if she cannot continue her line?" Lyra's father, the Emperor, sat at the head of the chamber, his regal frame slumped slightly. His silver robes shimmered like the calm surface of a frozen lake, but his eyes were heavy with worry. He had raised Lyra with love and care, teaching her the arts of diplomacy, strategy, and leadership, yet even he could not stop the judgment of their peers. "We have no choice," he finally said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "She will be sent to the human colony on Kepler 347. There, she will join Commander Rylan. Let their union prove something. Or fail." A quiet ripple of laughter traveled through the chamber, soft at first, then growing into sharp snickers. Lyra felt each laugh like a dagger pressing into her chest. She straightened, keeping her face calm, though her heart raced. For years she had trained to stand tall under scrutiny, to never let emotion betray her, but today she felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down. She had always wanted to serve her people, to make them proud, yet in their eyes, she was already a disappointment. The council continued their murmurs. "She'll be humiliated among humans," someone said. "It will be obvious that she is." "Broken," Lyra's jaw tightened. The word "broken" echoed in her mind like a cruel song. Every step she had taken, every lesson learned, seemed to collapse under the weight of their Dethi transport ship glided silently through the void, leaving Orinth behind. Lyra sat in the private cabin, her hands resting on the edge of the observation window. Stars streaked past like silver threads, and the endless darkness of space pressed gently against the glass. She should have felt awe at the universe, yet her heart was heavy with uncertainty. Human, strange, unpredictable creatures awaited her, and she was expected to join one of them, to unite two very different worlds. Her thoughts wandered to Rylan, the human commander she was meant to meet. She had only seen his records, a tall man, battle-scarred, confident, admired by his people. Would he see her as she truly was, or as the infertile princess everyone had whispered about back home? The memory of the council's laughter still stung, a bitter echo she could not shake. When the ship finally docked at Kepler 347. The human colony sprawled below her, a patchwork of steel and glass amid rolling green plains. Lyra's ship hissed as the airlock opened, and she stepped onto the platform. The human air felt different, warmer, heavier, but it carried a vitality that surprised her. Her boots clicked on the metallic floor as she descended toward the landing hall, where Rylan awaited. He was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders and a calm expression. His eyes were a striking blue, clear and unguarded, and for the first time, Lyra felt herself measured not by whispers of failure, but by simple human curiosity. "Princess Lyra," he said, bowing slightly, a gesture that seemed both respectful and cautious. "I hope your journey was tolerable." Lyra inclined her head, keeping her voice steady. "It was as expected. The stars are different from Orinth." She paused, unsure if he would understand the subtle compliment. Rylan's lips curved into a small smile. "Different, yes, but full of possibility." As days passed, Lyra began observing human life up close. They were loud, messy, and surprisingly resilient. Children played in the colony squares, laughing as robots rolled beside them. Adults argued fiercely over minor decisions, then shook hands and smiled as if nothing had happened. Lyra watched it all with quiet fascination. Humans were fragile in ways her people were not, yet there was a fire in them, a determination that she could not ignore. Rylan became her guide in this strange world. He showed her the colony's defenses, introduced her to the scientists and soldiers, and tried sometimes awkwardly to teach her human customs. At first, Lyra was rigid, careful to follow every rule perfectly. Yet, in moments when Rylan laughed at his own mistakes, or clumsily dropped utensils at a meal, she found herself laughing too, softly, a sound that felt like sunlight in a dark room. One evening, they walked along the cliffs overlooking the ocean-like plains of Kepler 347. The wind whipped against Lyra's crystalline hair, and she felt the alien ache of being so far from home. "Do humans always fight so much?" She asked quietly. Rylan chuckled. We fight because we care. Because we are stubborn. Sometimes it's foolish, but it keeps us moving. You'll see we humans are persistent. Lyra studied him, seeing determination in the way he spoke, compassion in the way he treated his people. Despite the rumors, the judgments, the whispered doubts, she felt something shift within her. Perhaps humans were not as strange as she feared. Perhaps this journey could teach her as much about herself as it could about them. That night, alone in her cabin, Lyra stared at the stars and allowed herself a fragile hope. She was far from Orinth, from her people's judgment, yet here she was alive, unbroken, learning to navigate a world that had once seemed impossible. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if laughter, doubt, and fear could be transformed into something stronger, understanding, alliance, even friendship. And somewhere, deep in her chest, a quiet determination began to grow. This human world would not define her. She would define herself, and perhaps, in time, she would show the universe exactly who Princess Lyra truly was. The Human Council organized a grand banquet in Lyra's honor. The hall was enormous, filled with the scent of alien spices, polished metal, and flickering lanterns. Humans crowded the tables, their faces curious, their eyes occasionally flicking to Lyra as if she were a living mystery. She walked in with measured grace, her crystal-like skin shimmering softly under the lights. Whispers followed her steps, and some humans exchanged quiet speculations. You are the famous Princess Lyra? A young officer asked, barely hiding his awe. Lyra inclined her head, replying with a soft, polite smile. She had learned to mask her feelings, but inside, her chest tightened. The memory of the council's laughter on Orinth still lingered, a shadow that clung to her as the banquet began. The conversation swirled around her. Humans asked about her planet, her people, and her life as a princess. Lyra answered carefully, showing intelligence and courtesy, yet trying not to reveal the hurt she carried. Then, unexpectedly, a senior human counselor leaned forward, his tone casual but sharp. And Princess, can you bear a child? Your people say you cannot. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Lyra felt her stomach knot, but she did not falter. She straightened, letting her violet eyes sweep across the room. I am more than what I can bear, she said, her voice calm but firm. The words hung in the air, a delicate sword that cut through doubt. Some humans blinked, surprised by her dignity. Others nodded, impressed by her courage. Rylan, seated beside her, placed a hand lightly on her wrist. And I am more than what others expect of me, he murmured, his voice a quiet anchor. Lyra allowed herself a faint smile at the gesture. In that moment, she realized that she was not entirely alone. This human, so different from anyone she had ever known, stood beside her not as a judge, but as an ally. The banquet continued, and Lyra observed humans closely. They were vibrant, unpredictable, and full of contradictions. One officer spilled wine accidentally, then laughed at his own clumsiness, while another argued fiercely with a scientist about the speed of starships. Lyra found herself noticing these small human imperfections, and strangely, she admired them. They were fragile yet resilient, chaotic yet full of life. Later that evening, as the guests left and the hall emptied, Lyra and Rylan walked along the balcony overlooking the colony. The twin moons reflected on the plains below, casting a silver glow. Do they always judge so quickly? Lyra asked, a hint of sadness in her voice. Rylan shook his head. Humans are curious, sometimes harsh. But we also value courage. You showed both tonight. That counts more than their whispers. Lyra looked out over the plains, letting his words sink in. For the first time since leaving Orinth, she felt a small relief, a flicker of hope. Perhaps humans were capable of seeing beyond the rumors, beyond her supposed failures. Perhaps, here, she could be more than the label her council had given her. But even as she felt this fragile optimism, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Could she truly prove herself in this world? Could she earn respect, trust, and perhaps even a place in the hearts of those who initially questioned her? Lyra clenched her hands, determination rising like a flame. She would not run from judgment. She would face it, head on, and show that her worth was measured not by the whispers of others, but by her own actions. As the night deepened, Lyra returned to her quarters, exhausted but resolute. The challenge had begun, not a physical battle, but a test of spirit. And for the first time in a long while, she felt alive with purpose. She would not let the past define her. She would not allow doubt to dictate her path. She would prove that courage and strength were not limited by expectation, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet determination whispered, This was only the beginning. The comm of Kepler 347 shattered without warning. Alarms blared across the colony as the central screens lit up with red warnings. A rogue asteroid field, previously undetected, was hurtling toward the planet. The humans panicked. Shouts filled the command centers, orders overlapped, and fear painted every face. Lyra stood in the observation room, her violet eyes scanning the data streams with laser focus. She had never seen anything like this on her homeworld. Humans were skilled, brave even, but chaos threatened to overwhelm them. Commander Ryland turned toward her, worry evident in his features. "Lyra, we need a strategy." "Can you?" Lyra nodded sharply. "I can help. Show me the fleet positions, the asteroid trajectories, everything." The humans stared at her, some skeptical, others silently hoping she might offer something they had missed. Lyra's mind raced. She began calculating angles, speeds, and possible maneuvers. Herinthian training had always emphasized precision and foresight. Humans relied more on improvisation, courage, and instinct. If she could combine her calculations with their boldness, perhaps they could survive. The command center buzzed with tension as Lyra issued instructions. Fleet Alpha, move to intercept at Vector 392. Shield arrays, adjust to angle 12. Civilian transports, follow escort Delta. Her voice was calm but firm, each command precise. Raylan watched, awe building, as humans followed her guidance without hesitation. Minutes felt like hours. Meteors tore through the void, their sheer mass threatening to tear the planet apart. Ships dodged, fired deflectors, and sometimes failed. Yet Lyra's strategy kept them coordinated, minimizing casualties. One human pilot whispered, almost reverently, "She sees everything." Finally, the last asteroid approached. Lyra's hands moved over the controls, issuing the final commands. "Now, all units engage full deflection. Synchronize shields with gravitational fields. Timing is everything." A tense silence followed, then a massive ripple across the colony's defenses. Asteroids veered off course, exploding in harmless fragments, while civilians cheered as the immediate threat passed. Hundreds of lives were saved that day, thanks to Lyra's swift calculations and the humans' unwavering execution. Ryland turned to her, his expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "Lyra, that was incredible. You saved them all." Lyra felt a small, quiet pride, but she did not smile immediately. The danger had passed, but the realization hit her with full force. The humans who had once laughed at her doubts, who whispered about her weakness, were now looking at her differently. Respect shone in their eyes, even if silently. The Colony Council later convened to acknowledge her efforts. "Princess Lyra's quick thinking and strategic guidance prevented a disaster," a senior officer announced. "Her understanding of spatial dynamics and fleet coordination is extraordinary." For the first time, Lyra felt the sting of humiliation fade, replaced by something unfamiliar, acknowledgement. The humans had faced the same fear and chaos she had, yet they had survived, and she had helped lead them. She realized then that strength was not only physical or inherited. Sometimes it was measured in courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when others froze. That night, standing on the cliff overlooking the now quiet plains of Kepler 347, Lyra and Rylan watched the twin moons reflect on the surface. The wind carried the scent of alien flora, and for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to breathe fully. "You've changed things today," Raylan said quietly. "Not just for them, but for yourself." Lyra smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in weeks. "I only did what I had to. But, yes, something has shifted. I feel it too." In the darkness of space, far from Orinth, Lyra began to understand a simple truth. Strength was more than genetics or tradition. It was the courage to step forward when everything was uncertain, the determination to act when fear threatened to stop you. And for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next, without doubt, without hesitation. Months passed on Kepler 347, and the colony settled into a cautious rhythm. Humans respected Lyra now, but their respect was not yet complete admiration. She had proved her intelligence and courage during the asteroid crisis, yet whispers about her infertility still lingered. Lyra had learned to ignore them, focusing instead on her work, her studies of human culture, and her growing connection with Commander Rylan. Rylan had become more than a guide. He was a companion, someone whose presence reassured her in ways she did not fully understand. They trained together, studied the planet's defenses, and shared quiet moments under the twin moons. Slowly, laughter began to replace tension. Lyra found herself smiling more often. letting the humans see not just the princess, but the person beneath the crystalline skin. Then one morning, the colony physician approached her with an expression Lyra had never seen, awe mixed with disbelief. "Princess, I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "but your body, it's changing. You are fertile. Your systems are adapting to human genetics." Lyra froze. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of emotions colliding: shock, fear, hope, disbelief. For years she had carried the label of incapable, broken, unfit. Now standing in the sterile white of the clinic, she faced a reality no one, not even the humans, had expected. "Am I?" "Really?" she whispered, her violet eyes wide. The physician nodded. "Yes, it's extraordinary. The way your physiology is responding. It is unprecedented. You may bear children. Perhaps even strong, healthy children." Lyra felt a surge of emotion she could barely contain. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She had feared this moment would never come, that her life would always be shadowed by doubt. Instead, she was staring at the beginning of something impossible, something miraculous. Rylan, who had been standing quietly at the door, stepped forward. His hand reached for hers, warm and steady. "Lyra, that's incredible. You've always been extraordinary, with or without this. But now, you're more than anyone could have imagined." Lyra blinked, swallowing hard. She had spent so long trying to prove her worth, to survive the judgment of others, that she had forgotten how to accept joy without suspicion. Now she allowed herself to feel it fully. Not pride born of obligation, but awe at the universe's strange, unpredictable gift. In the weeks that followed, the colony noticed subtle changes in Lyra's demeanor. She moved with newfound confidence, her presence commanding yet gentle. Humans no longer whispered doubts, they came to her for advice, guidance, and sometimes for comfort. Even the officers who had once questioned her strength found themselves inspired by her quiet resilience. Lyra and Rylan grew closer. They shared long walks under the twin moons, discussing strategy, philosophy, and the strange bonds forming between Orinthians and humans. In private moments, Lyra allowed herself laughter, curiosity, and even vulnerability. The fear that had clung to her since childhood began to dissolve, replaced by something deeper: connection, belonging, and hope. And yet, even as she embraced this personal transformation, Lyra knew the real challenge awaited. Her return to Orinth would be scrutinized. The council would see her not as the infertile princess, but as a symbol of what was possible, an unpredictable, unstoppable force bridging two worlds. But Lyra did not fear them. She had faced judgment, panic, and death itself, and she had prevailed. Now stronger than ever, she understood that her worth had never been measured by whispers or expectations. It was measured by courage, love, and the will to move forward when the universe seemed intent on holding her back. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of the future, a future where laughter no longer mocked her, where human and Orinthian life intertwined, where she could shape destiny on her own terms. And in that dream, a quiet spark of joy ignited, a joy she had thought forever impossible. Lyra had changed, inside and out. And the universe would notice. The Orinthian capital looked the same from the ship window, yet Lyra felt a storm of emotions churning inside her. The spires gleamed in the sunlight, untouched by time, yet the whispers of her past failures lingered in every corner of her memory. She had changed. The princess who left had been cautious, uncertain, haunted by judgment. The woman returning was strong, confident, and unstoppable. Raylan stood beside her, quiet and steady. He had accompanied her back to Orinth, a bold gesture no human had dared before. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, his hand brushing hers. Lyra squeezed it, drawing strength from his presence. "As ready as I will ever be," she replied, her voice calm but firm. The council chamber awaited. The same cold light, the same rigid seats, the same murmurs of doubt. As Lyra stepped in, heads turned. Whispers erupted almost immediately. "She changed? Is it true? The humans brought her back." Lyra ignored them, focusing instead on the Emperor. His expression was unreadable, yet she felt the flicker of relief that he had survived the time without her. "Father," she said, bowing respectfully, "I have returned." The council erupted into chatter, some skeptical, others intrigued. Then, a voice pierced the room. "Princess Lyra, have you achieved anything in the human colony?" Lyra took a deep breath, standing taller than ever. "I have learned, I have grown, and I have survived," she said, her voice steady. I have worked with the humans to protect lives. I have faced danger, and I have succeeded where failure seemed certain. The room was silent, disbelief spreading like a wave. Then, slowly, Ryland stepped forward, holding a small glowing bundle wrapped in soft fabric. "And this," he said, "is proof of the future. Proof that life adapts. That courage and love create strength beyond what anyone expects." Lyra's heart swelled. She stepped forward, unveiling the bundle to the council. A soft murmur ran through the room. The infant inside, a living combination of Orinthian and human traits, glowed faintly under the chamber lights. Violet eyes, delicate crystalline skin, and small human features combined into a perfect miracle. The council was silent. Some bowed their heads in shame, realizing their cruel laughter had been misplaced. Others stared in awe, unable to reconcile their assumptions with the living proof before them. Lyra held her child firmly, her spine straight, her eyes blazing with quiet triumph. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Lyra, my daughter, you have surpassed every expectation. You have not only represented our people with honor, but shown us what courage truly means." Lyra nodded, swallowing back tears. She felt every moment of doubt, every whispered insult, every fear of failure melt away. They had once judged her by what she could not do. Now they saw what she had achieved: life, love, and the bridge between worlds. Ryland smiled, standing beside her. "She never needed your approval," he said quietly to the council. "She only needed the chance." Lyra turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. She had feared the council's judgment, the laughter, the disbelief. But standing here, holding life in her hands, she understood. Her worth had never been defined by others' expectations. She was more than labels, more than doubts, more than fear. She was Lyra, the princess who had faced the universe and returned stronger than any counselor could imagine. The chamber erupted into applause, hesitant at first, then growing into genuine admiration. Humans and Orinthians alike began to whisper her name with respect, with awe, with hope. She had returned not as a princess who failed, but as a symbol of courage, resilience, and the impossible becoming possible. Lyra held her child close, the warmth of new life grounding her. She had come back to Orinth to face judgment, and instead, she had rewritten the story of her life. The empire that had laughed at her now stood in quiet reverence. And for the first time, Lyra felt complete, not because she had proven them right, but because she had proven herself. And in that moment, Lyra knew the universe had more challenges ahead, but she was ready. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. She had returned, and nothing would ever hold her back again. Years had passed since Princess Lyra returned to Orinth with her child, and Commander Ryland by her side. The empire had changed quietly, imperceptibly at first, and then with unstoppable momentum. Humans and Orinthians now worked together, sharing technology, culture, and knowledge. And Lyra's name was spoken with awe, a symbol of courage and possibility. No longer whispers of doubt. Lyra stood on the balcony of the royal palace, looking out over the city. Towers sparkled like crystals in the sunlight. Ships glided silently through the skyways, and below, children, both human and Orinthian, played together, without care for heritage or species. Her child, a lively little being with violet eyes and a curious mind, ran through the gardens laughing. Each step, each smile, was a reminder of what she had achieved. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she had left for Kepler, 347. To the judgmental council and the whispers that branded her infertile. Back then, fear and shame had weighed heavily on her. She had wondered if she would ever be respected, if she would ever matter beyond her perceived failures. And yet, here she was, not just respected, but loved, admired, and remembered. Ryland joined her on the balcony, resting his hand on hers. "Do you remember the first day you arrived on Kepler 347? He asked quietly. Lyra smiled softly. "I thought I would fail. I thought the humans would see me as useless." Her violet eyes reflected the sunlight. "I didn't know then that the challenge wasn't just proving them wrong. It was proving myself right." Ryland squeezed her hand gently. "And you did. Beyond what anyone imagined." She looked down at their child, watching curiosity and wonder spark in the small face. All of this, it's more than I ever dreamed. Not because of what I did alone, but because I didn't stop believing. Even when the universe seemed against me. The Empire had learned from her example. Councils now debated not just tradition, but possibility. Citizens celebrated courage over conformity. Humans and Orinthians worked side by side to explore, defend, and protect their worlds. Lyra had become a bridge, a living proof that difference could be strength. And doubt could be fuel for greatness. One evening, Lyra and Rylan took their child to the cliffs overlooking the ocean-like plains of Kepler 347, just as they had so many years ago. The twin moons reflected on the water, a reminder of beginnings and the endless cycles of life. The little one pointed at the moons, giggling, asking questions Lyra had never imagined. She answered with patience, curiosity, and joy. Feeling the legacy of her choices unfold in real time, Lyra's heart swelled with a quiet certainty. The world was bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than she had ever known. She had faced judgment, fear, and impossible odds, and emerged not just victorious, but stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever. The laughter that had once hurt her now fueled her, a reminder that even ridicule could not contain her spirit. Later that night, Lyra stood alone in the palace garden, gazing at the stars above. She thought of Orinth, of humans, of the countless challenges she had faced. Every moment of doubt, every whispered insult, had been a step toward this very life. She realized that true strength was not in avoiding fear, but in facing it, moving forward anyway, and embracing what was possible. And as she looked at the stars, Lyra smiled, knowing her story was far from over. She had changed the course of two worlds. She had become more than a princess. She had become a symbol of courage, resilience, and hope. The Empire would remember her. The humans would remember her. And one day, her child would grow to carry that legacy further. Lyra had turned ridicule into triumph, doubt into inspiration, and the impossible into reality. And in the quiet of the night, under the vast universe, Princess Lyra finally felt peace. She had returned, she had fought, and she had left a legacy that would never fade. Obt. Yet she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. She had learned to survive in their harsh world, to rise above whispered insults. But the thought of being sent to a human unknown, unpredictable, flawed stirred something unfamiliar, fear, when her father rose. Signaling the end of the council, Lyra's eyes met his. His gaze was heavy but filled with an unspoken apology. She understood what he could not say. This was not her failure, it was duty, politics, and survival. All entwined into a bitter path she must walk alone. Lyra left the chamber without a word, her robes flowing behind her like liquid starlight. She did not look at the council as she passed, though she felt their eyes pierce through her back. The hallways were silent now, yet every step she took felt louder than the laughter of the counselors. She wondered what awaited her on Kepler 347. Humans were said to be resilient, clever, and unpredictable, but she had no allies there. Only the weight of expectation and the whispers of her own inadequacy. In her private chambers, Lyra stood before a mirror, staring at her reflection. Her violet eyes shone with a cold determination. "I am more than their judgment," she whispered to herself. "I will not be defined by what I cannot do, but by what I will accomplish." Despite the fear, a small flame of defiance sparked in her heart. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her long ago. Strength was not always loud, and courage was not always recognized. Sometimes it was the quiet decisions, the silent steps forward, that made the difference. As the transport ship was prepared for her journey, Lyra packed nothing but her essentials and her resolve. The laughter of the counselors faded behind her, replaced by the soft hum of the docking bay. The stars outside beckoned with cold brilliance. She did not know if she would succeed or fail. But one thing was certain. She would face the humans, face her fate, and face herself with unflinching determination. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the doubt, a quiet spark of hope whispered that this journey might change everything, not just for her, but for the empire that had once laughed at her.